So I guess should we jump right in? I'd like to introduce you if I could. Are you ready for that, Harry? Oh, I can't hear you. You're on mute. Or did you mute everyone, David, including
I'm
Harry?
back. Yes.
Oh,
So,
okay.
thank you, Lauren.
Okay, yeah,
I'm
I'll do
ready.
that now. Great. Okay, so it's my pleasure to introduce Harry the historian. Harry Sanders has been a historian almost since birth. Born in Drumheller and raised in Calgary, it is his passion to collect and share the fascinating stories of life in Calgary and Alberta. Harry not only preserves and promotes history as a living as a freelance historical consultant, but also serves as an active volunteer on the boards of local historical societies, including the Jewish Historical Society of Southern Alberta and Chinook Country Historical Society. He has published in several magazines and is the author of over 7 books on local history. He also served as historian laureate for the Calgary Heritage Authority in 2012. A popular public speaker with fascinating stories, I'm sure you will find his presentation tonight most enjoyable. Take it away, Harry.
Thanks very much, Lauren. I always like that over 7 books. It all depends how you define a book. If a glorified pamphlet or vanity press is a book, then I'm a prolific author. I have a confession to make about tonight's presentation. I had to truncate it a little. I've had some time pressure and a competing item on my agenda that overlaps nicely with this one. So if you guys don't mind hearing a little bit more about James Short School than you wanted to, then that helps me. What I decided to do, just because it fit in with what I was working on already, is to start at the other end. So the first half. I mean, this is the third presentation. The first one was during Historic Calgary Week, and that covered all of what I like to think of as Reinach Avenue from about 5th Street East to 2nd Street West. The Reinach Avenue was, once again, just to sum up, it was so named by the Canadian Pacific Railway or its real estate subsidiary, the Canada Northwest Land Company. Calgary was... there's been human habitation here for at least 12,000 years. The only reason we don't know about any more is the last ice age destroyed all previous evidence of any human inhabitation. So to say, that Calgary began in 1875 is not true to say, because of course the site of Fort Calgary, which the Mounted Police established in 1875 at the confluence of the Bow and Elbow rivers, was already an important site for millennia before the Mounted Police showed up and built the fort, incidentally on unceded land. Treaty 7 was signed 2 years later after they built the fort. So having said that, just to acknowledge that there's 12,000 years of human inhabitation before people of European descent got here. So the Calgary's origin as an entity with the name Calgary is as a mounted police post, but the Canadian Pacific Railway really gave it a future and also gave it a location. For those who have seen Blazing Saddles, remember the whole thing about Blazing Saddles was who knew where the railway was going to be, and that's how you could make money, is knowing where the railway was. Oh, sorry. Anyway, so it was with Canadian with the Canadian West. Wherever the Canadian Pacific Railway went, they ignored all existing settlements and placed their stations on their own land, which they then subdivided and sold. So in the case of Calgary, the existing settlement was where Inglewood is right now. And when the railway came, it came into Calgary, through Calgary, out the other end of Calgary, kept going, and put their station where the Calgary Tower is now, and then told the good folks of Calgary, well, if you want your business to succeed, you're going to have to abandon your property east of the Elbow River and relocate to land that you'll buy from us over here. So the CPR subdivided the land that they had, which is basically downtown Calgary from 6th Street East to 4th Street West, and gave the streets and avenues names of their choosing. So that's how we have names like Stephen Avenue and Atlantic Avenue that we continue to have today, or Barclay Street. and others that have vanished. Center Street is no longer McTavish Street, and 4th Avenue is no longer Reinach Avenue. These names applied from 1884, when the subdivision was created, until 1904, when the town council passed a bylaw saying we don't have street names anymore, we've just numbered them all. Baron Adolf Reinach was a Jewish person who moved to France. He was a banker, very important person, very important banker in France, heavily involved in government, and unfortunately was involved with a scandal that involving a project to build the Panama Canal. That project wasn't realized. It was a later one that was completed. It was highly scandalous for the government, and Baron Reinach killed himself. This was after the avenue was named for him, and before it was numbered 4th Avenue. Why he enjoyed that honor is he was an investor in the Canadian Pacific Railway Company. So you pay to play is how you got your name on the map of Calgary. But to our knowledge, he's the only Jewish person for whom a street in Calgary was ever named. So enough about him. I'm going to, and having said all that, I forgot to share the screen and show you what I've got. And it's somewhere. Hold on a second. Are you guys looking at that now? Good. Okay. Excellent. All right. There he is. There's our man, Baron Jacob Adolf Reinach. Here we have Reinach Avenue, such as it was at the very beginning. I'm not sure where the photograph was taken. And also, I'm going to repeat this bit because I don't know exactly where he was, but the first Jewish person we've got on 4th Avenue, and the only one that I know of from the time it was called Reinach, it was east, so it's not for tonight, but a fellow named Elijah Geffen, who was a junk dealer, lived at 31, lived at, hold on a second. Oh no, we don't know his address on Reinach Avenue East, and he later on moved to 5th Avenue. Anyway, one day we'll learn more about Elijah Geffen, I hope. What I'd like to talk about tonight, so we talked last time about many of the Jewish residences and businesses and places associated with worship, the rabbis' houses. When the synagogue was on 5th Avenue, several rabbis lived on 4th Avenue. What I'd like to start with is the west side, go west of Center Street, and note Jews by their absence. It was very light Jewish presence west of Center Street up until the 1960s, and we'll see a bit of that. So I just want to look at 4 different blocks. Now, I'd like to propose something to everyone. You've been very generous with me to give me 2 different nights to cover 4th Avenue, Reinach Avenue. What I'd like to do is present to you the west side tonight, and then have something like, however long you guys want to give me, however long you would like to do without this, maybe 6 months, maybe a year, give me the time to come up with something more. Because what we've been talking about when we talk about this is more like lists of who lived where and which address and who owned what. And not as many stories, not as many photographs, which I really want to do. So I'm just pitching it that you'll have me back, and we'll have more stories. So that will be in the near future. So I'd like to start west of Center Street on the north side of 4th Avenue, and it's this giant piece of business here. It's the ampersand now. When it was built, it was Sun Life Plaza. And I had a look. I thought, well, maybe Jews founded Sun Life Plaza. Maybe I had a whole block of Jewish stories here, but I haven't. So what I can tell you is something that used to be here. Here's the fire insurance plan from 1914. You're looking at 4th Avenue across the top. This is this is the post-war one. They were done intermittently. Excellent source for finding what used to be where. If anyone is interested, these are available online, and they're they weren't done. I mean, like, the advantage to us is we have this document that shows us the footprint of a building. Sometimes it's named. We know that we can see the lot on which it was situated. It's a block at a glance, and it's color coded for fire rating. What it is, but the thing is, it wasn't designed. They didn't do this to create an historical document. They did this for current needs. It was for rating for fire insurance. So these were circulated to insurance companies, and then they could tell at a glance, what was the construction material of a building, how near to other buildings, and they could use this as an aid in calculating the fire risk. But we inherit these as an excellent historical source. So this is the pre-First World War one, that block. Here's the post-Second World War one, but I always like to use the first one. And I like to have a blue square around sites that are that Jews owned or lived in or worked in or something like that. And what have we got here? Not much. 106 4th Avenue Southwest, or West as it was back then. Oh, and I'll try and be mindful of the chat, and probably everybody is muted. I don't know, David, because I just think if anybody wants to leap in and say something, or maybe we can just keep an eye on a chat. And I don't know, David, maybe you can unmute somebody who posts something. I have no idea. Or we just can't.
Harry, I think you're in. Harry, I think you're in the talker's view.
Sorry, the talker's view? Oh, you mean, how do you mean?
In the PowerPoint, we see all the slides on the bottom, and we see the next slide that you're going to present.
Oh, isn't that funny?
Yeah, I think. Oh,
no. Is that better?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Okay.
Harry,
Better.
if I may interrupt you for a second, Harry,
Please.
It appears that you have a boiling kettle behind you. It might run dry.
Oh, it's an humidifier.
Okay,
That
thank
might
you.
run dry, but I'll live. I could turn it off and then it's not a distraction, unless you guys like the distraction. I've aimed it away. Thank you very much. If it had been a kettle, it would have been a problem. Anyway, just about nothing on this block associated with Jews through time. It's that one was a bit of an anomaly. And we get so many Anglo-Saxon names. I'd like to have that as part of the final version of this presentation. How you see, all the Goldsteins and Malkins east of Center Street suddenly become the Tomlinsons, and Wilkinsons west of 4th Street. Anyway, here's the house, 106 4th Avenue Southwest. It's built by 1892 when it was the home of the Beveridge family, Henry and Mary Beveridge, their son Jack. The house remained in place until 1929 when it's demolished to make way for a service station. And I was hoping to find out if somebody like Ed and Ted, I can't think of Ted's name, boy. Anyway, he was the president of the
Reinach.
Ted Reinach, yes. Ted Reinach owned a chain of service stations. He was president of the Service Station Association. I was hoping to find out if it was one of his. I didn't have time to get that far. So that can change the talk. Anyway, it becomes Mrs. Phoebe Price's boarding house during the First World War. Didn't find any Jews living there, but there's an ad placed, 1913. A well-educated, reliable man desires fixed salary engagement with responsible real estate or other business. This is somebody living in the house. Speaks English, French, German, Spanish, Italian, Hungarian, Romanian, Serbian, and Slavic dialects. Anyway, but not a Jewish person. This one I love. It's D. Van Dyke. I don't know his first name. can guess though. Anyway, it's the Arkan family living in this house. This isn't them. This is a photograph of an earlier family standing outside of their house. It's Harry and Annie Arkan and their children who lived there between 1916 and 1922. And I know nothing about them other than what I can glean from the old newspapers. But he's born in Russia in 1869, Harry, moved to Canada in 1905, marries Annie, and they live here with their children, Morris, Isaac, Abraham, Nathan, and Lily. And he was a livestock dealer, which is a real phenomenon. I mean, this is something that the Jewish Historical Society is going to revisit next month when we have an event celebrating the life of Manny Cohen. And Manny was involved with livestock trade. This was a big thing among Jews. The Kachin family was big into the livestock trade. Lots of Jews were into cattle trading, hides and furs. In fact, the last remaining remnant of what I call Calgary's meatpacking district, where the stockyards were, where the Burns Abattoir was, is the Kachin Brothers Abattoir, which is now the Crossroads Market. This is the building that the Krieger brothers bought after it ceased to be a packing house, and modeled it, adapted the building, modeled it after Granville Island in Vancouver, and turned it into a market, restaurants, a theater. But they couldn't make a go of it at that time, but they had the right idea because the Crossroads Market moved in and took over the same space for the same thing. So Harry's part of a phenomenon there. Their son, Jack, goes to the University of Alberta. I'm not sure what he was studying, but there's a news item in 1919 when he's arrested for the possession of Soviet literature, but they give him a suspended sentence. So he's convicted of possessing Soviet literature, but dismissed, and the family relocates to Winnipeg. I hope to track them down, and I don't know if anyone in Calgary knows this family that left, certainly by the 1920s. In the same house, we have Meyer Nagler and his wife Esther and the children living here in the 1920s, perhaps immediately after the Arkans. It's all rental property, mind you, at that time. It's somebody else owns the house. Meyer was a grocer at the City Hall Market in 1925, and so many of you remember the City Hall Market. I don't know if Sheila Gurvich is on tonight, but her parents were merchants there. Their daughter Sabine, who lived in this house, Sabine Nagler later became president of the junior chapter of Hadassah in 1929. I know she did much more than that, but that's what I know about Sabine Nagler. And here's the family. I got this photograph from Therese. And this, I don't think this is the house. This is the same family at a different residence at a different time. And that's my one item. And then the house is torn down after them and it becomes a gas station. Then we go a little bit further down the block and I could find, to date, I have found no Jewish associations with the Calgary Women's Hostel, which was there for about 25 years. I think it's a purpose-built building, something that was a landmark in Calgary and a needed one, a necessary one at that time. The next one over, we have the Coca-Cola bottling plant, and I couldn't find a Jewish association with that one either. I know that the Perlmutters had the Polar Aerated soda works just a few blocks away. There were Jews, at least a couple of sets of Jews into soft drink bottling. And I know there was a Coca-Cola plant on McLeod Trail that one of the Horowitzes later owned. But here's a Coca-Cola company plant on 4th Avenue. Beautiful looking building. It's gone now. Opened in 1919, and I couldn't find a Jewish association. Shame it's not still there. Now we go to the south side of the block, and this is my pet project right now. I do hope to hear if anyone here is descended from someone who attended James Short School, because history remembers it as basically the Chinese school in Calgary. It's the school which is nearest to Chinatown, in the end, when the school closed in 1967. Was basically the entire student body was Chinese Canadian, and there's a great photograph. If anyone knew Louis Dufour or his son Paul Dufour, Anyway, Chinese pioneers in Calgary. Paul Dufu's wife, there's a great photograph of the principal of the school who was not Chinese with Paul Dufu's wife. I can't remember her name. She's writing the memo that's going to go out to the children in one of the Chinese languages to let them know that the school is going to close and the children are going to be bused to their new location until there's a more permanent arrangement. Anyway, but historically, lots and lots and lots of Jews went to this school. I've had occasion, I'll tell you why this is my pet project. You can see where the words James Short are gone here. So it's the blank blank parkade. It was known as the James Short School for many years, and then it was demolished. And I'll just get ahead here and I'll show you, I'll tell you a little bit about the school. Hold on a second. Here we have the fire insurance plan. We're looking at 4th Avenue along the top, 5th Avenue along the bottom, Center Street to the right, 1st Street to the left. So it's you know, we know from our earlier, from people's family memories and from the previous talk in December, just how many Jews lived around here. Jews were never a majority, but there was a real concentration, certainly of Jews of, you know, I mean, just about all Jews were immigrant families at that time, and not the wealthy ones, you know, the ones who were better off were living somewhere else. But anyway, so why has this become my pet project? The school was first built in 1887. You can see, if you look at the center of the block where the number 23 is on its side, and you can see there's sort of a pink outline in the middle that's been taped over. You can't, it's been covered over. What's happened here? They've taken an earlier fire insurance plan and just amended it. So you can see they've got a new piece of paper that they've glued over top. So they had this little patch of paper, I guess, that they sent out to everyone who owned a copy of the fire insurance plan, I suppose, to paste over, you know, where changes have been made or something like that. You know, they certainly saved money by not reprinting it. The original school from 1887, a brick school, was where that faint pink outline is that's gone. So that was Calgary. I mean, we've had 2 school systems, you know, Protestant, which became the public school system eventually, dates from the 1880s, and the same with the Catholic school district. Well, the public school, the school was established something like 1884, 1885. There was an excellent teacher and principal who was running the place, and then when the territorial school inspector came around to check on how things were going, turned out the guy didn't have a teaching certificate, so he was fired, even though he was a great teacher. Anyway, but there was no permanent building. They were just using rented quarters, including rooms over the jail, the town jail. So the kids had to go upstairs from where the prisoners were to go to their classes. And that was doubled as the town hall. Anyway, in 1887, this is where they built a permanent school. And you can see the western 2/3 of the block became school board property. The eastern third of the block, where you see, you know, individual lots and separate buildings built in there, that was all private property. And that's where James Short Park and Parkade is right now. Anyway, so the original school, it was Calgary's first purpose-built public school. It was built in 1887. In 1889, the school board headhunted James Short, who was an English teacher in Ontario, and they wanted him to come out here and be the principal and be one of the teachers. So he did that. He came out here in 1889 and became the principal, and then he saw that there was no high school program. So the first thing he did was institute qualifying exams. So you'd have to go all the way to Winnipeg to go to high school if you wanted to, but at least you could have a qualifying exam. Incidentally, this is the same year that the first permanent Jewish residents come to Calgary, Jacob and Rachel Diamond in 1889, but they don't have any school-age children yet, so there are no Jews going to the school yet. No Chinese either, because of the prohibitive immigration policies. It was just basically men who left their wives and children back in China and provided for them from money they earned here. Anyway, so then James Short single-handedly started a high school program and was its sole teacher. And he was very poorly paid. He worked all the time. He worked morning till night. He worked through his summer breaks. And he kept telling them he needed another teacher for the high school program. And they kept saying no. And finally, in 1892, he went to the board and he said, okay, I'm sick of asking. You're going to give me a second teacher to teach high school. And the board replied, well, will you take a pay cut, to pay for this second teacher? And he said, no, you pay me almost nothing already. So then what they did was they severed his contract, and they severed the contract of another teacher so that by saving those two salaries, they could hire 3 people at a reduced salary. So really it's a labor history story. It shows you why we need the ATA. Anyway, but James Short, having his contract severed, he then became the board secretary treasurer, went to law school, became a lawyer. Then he became Calgary's crown prosecutor, which he was for about 25 years. And then he finally retired. Then they built and he was the chairman of the public school board at the time that they built all those sandstone schools, including the one where all the Jewish kids went, this one right here. So that, you see this sandstone school, that is, I'm sorry, I don't have a picture of the original school, but you can see that the sandstone school is the blue square here, built in 1905. And then the 2 schools coexisted until 1914, when they tore down the original brick one and then pasted it over in this page from the fire insurance maps. Anyway, in 1938, they named this school for James Short, who had been the first principal of the institution. This also, by the way, the sandstone school there was the first home of the teacher training college in Calgary, the Calgary Normal School, which I know at least one Jewish resident in Calgary attended that school. That was before teacher training was a university program. It was just a separate college that was established in 1906. So for the first 2 years, it operated out of this building. Then it moved to a new purpose-built building that's now the McDougall Center, the Southern Alberta provincial government headquarters. And then in the 1920s, the teacher training college moved to the new SAIT campus. And then in the 1940s, the university took it over. So what had been the teacher training college in Calgary now became the University of Alberta Faculty of Education Calgary branch. And that's the origin of the University of Calgary. It started as a branch of the University of Alberta Faculty of Education, but it wasn't created from whole cloth. They took the old Calgary Normal School to do that. So the result is, you can tell your friends that the University of Calgary is older than the University of Alberta, because the University of Alberta opened in 1908, but the Calgary Teacher Training College opened in 1906, and that still exists. It's the education faculty here now. Anyway, too much detail. So why have I Jews come back into the story, don't worry. Why am I interested in this right now? Well, you've learned from the news probably that the name James Short has been removed from, they tore down the school in 1967. They saved the cupola that you see on top of the building and placed it at the corner, and built a subsurface parkade, James Short Park, a surface level parkade, a surface level park, James Short Park. And it serves Chinatown. Well, James Short, this is 2 blocks from this is across the street from Chinatown. James Short personally opposed the establishment of Chinatown nearby in 1910 because it was where he lived. He didn't want where he lived to become Chinatown. So it was kind of a property rights thing that moved him to oppose Chinatown, but it took the expression was, it drew on racism. It was, James Short was appearing before city council saying, oh, Chinese people, they bring property values down, they have no personal hygiene, just awful things. So when the city established the park in 1990 and named it, they didn't do their due diligence, because at that time, people in Chinatown would have said, James Short, he's the asshole who tried to prevent Chinatown from even being here in the first place. So here we are 35 years later, and City Council directed the administration to remove the name and come up with a process to get a new name. and they hired me as the historian for the project. So I'm the world's expert now on James Short Park and James Short School, I'll tell you. Anyway, I think they're right. I think they're absolutely right. James Short is a mixed figure from history. He did a lot of good in this city, and he did a lot of bad by using hurtful sentiment and language to try and oppose Chinatown and keep Chinese Canadians away from the center of the city, from settling there on land that they had already purchased. And there is now a process. They're going to come up with a new name. And there will be a new interpretive sort of theme for this park. It'll be a new concept related to Chinatown. But one thing that we shouldn't forget is that it was a real, the student body was kind of polyglot. This is a time early in the 20th century when Calgary's population increased tenfold in a matter of 10 years. Calgary went from a little over 4,000 people in 1901 to 43,000 in 1911 and to about 65,000 in 1912. People expected that before long Calgary would have a population of 100,000. But the real estate bubble burst. There was no investment beginning in 1913. And then the First World War happened, and so it really delayed Calgary's, and then the Great Depression. So it took until after the Second World War, the discovery of oil at Leduc, for Calgary to reach 100,000 in population and really begin to have a sustained oil boom at that time. But the student population at the school, it was Russian, it was Chinese. There were there are several newspaper items about it at the time saying, and there's kind of a theme to it, like it's sort of superimposing a concept of the British Empire on this mixture of immigrant kids from all over the world. That there might be from Greece or Romania or wherever else, Japan, but they're all British now. Anyway, and many of them were Jews. And one of the things I've done in the course of this research is how to look at the attendance sheets. And this is something that once the pandemic is through, anyone can examine at the at the Glenbow at the University of Calgary, is attendance sheets for all of Calgary's public schools. They exist. The Calgary Board of Education kept them and placed them in the Glenbow. So I was able to look at attendance sheets starting in about 1908 and going up as far as I could get, up to about the 1940s or 1950s. You'd think it was the Hebrew school. There are so many Jews there. And I'm sure anyone who had family here at that time has got relatives who went there. Two of my dad's cousins attended this school. And one nice thing that you can find now that Calgary's newspapers are online and searchable with optical character recognition, is you can do all this searching. Doesn't help much with Jewish names, or Chinese for that matter, because the newspapers misspelled them so badly. My dad's cousin Pearl Srolovitz, who became Pearl Goldberg, attended the school, and I could see two different misspellings of Srolovitz in one newspaper article. But one thing that they would always do is they'd publish the sports awards. So you can always find names of people. If there's somebody you're looking for, a relative or someone from a figure from the history of Calgary, if they went to school and they were involved in sports, their names, also examinations, they would have lists of students who passed their examinations and lists of students in whatever sport they competed and how they did and stuff like that, and who they competed against. So without giving you many specific examples, there is just, a ton of Jews who went to this school all the way from, probably about 1906 right through to the 50s when I stopped looking. Although at that time, just as with other families, Jews are moving out of the center of the city, and this becomes more or less a Chinese school. And that's about the time when the Hebrew school and the Parrott school become day schools anyway. But so there's kind of a forgotten Jewish history of James Short School. And I hope to do something, in the context of this Reinach Avenue project or on its own, but Jews of James Short School. Here we're seeing the here's the park. So you're standing above the parkade, but this is a public park that's got programming and stuff like that. What you're looking west towards is the TransCanada Tower, or TC Energy Tower, which is actually on the site of the Sandstone School. So you're standing on that private property at the east end of the block. In the far end of the park is the edge of the playground where the original school stood, but the Sandstone School was where that glass tower is right now. And you go right to the corner. Oh, I've missed the photograph. Let's see. Oh, here we go. Oh, here, this is an oblique aerial view of the site. It's at the bottom left corner. So you can see the Sandstone School on one edge of the schoolyard. And then if you cast your eye further left towards the left edge of the picture, you're following along towards Center Street with the bottom edge of the photograph is Fifth Avenue. The next street over, away from the bottom edge, is Fourth Avenue. And then if you look over to the left and you see where the cars are parking and where there's a few commercial buildings, that's the private property. So that was later taken over. But I want to get to the corner lot, because now we get back to our Jewish content. It was an investment property here and there. It ultimately became a part of a car lot. But briefly, my great aunt Golda Srolovitz, married to Max Srolovitz, owned this property. I mean, it was probably who knows if it was her own ownership, her own money and her own investment, or if it was just something placed in her name for tax purposes, and it was Max that owned it. He had a store, Kitty Corner. So there's a forgotten piece of Jewish history, is that a Jewish family once owned the very site where the James Short cupola stands. Here's another problem, though, with the interpretation of the site. I mean, if you look at it, it's sort of like a British colonial design, this cupola. It's inconsistent. You know what I mean? It's like it makes the colonial statement in a park that will be interpreted with a Chinese Canadian theme. I hope that wasn't too much about James Short Park, but I've got lists. I mean, if anyone wanted to know, I can tell you which Jews attended James Short Park. Now we move a block over, block 14. So this is Kitty Corner to where the school was, and beautiful houses. It's upscale west of Center Street. So this is much nicer than the houses where most of the Jews were living on 4th Avenue. And we can see what the block looks like right now. So we've got an in-park lot where the Summit Hotel was, and the tall building at the center is the International Hotel. And here they are in their heyday back in the 1970s, both Jewish owned. And I'll get to that in a moment. Here, once again, is the fire insurance map from before the First World War. Here we have the same block after the Second World War. Get back to the one that I prefer and look at the Jewish associations with the block. And none of them are historical before the 1960s. The larger square to the left is the footprint of the Summit Hotel, which Sam Switzer built in the 60s. And the narrower one in the center of the block is Alvin Libben's International Hotel, dating from 1970. So we start with the site of the Summit. A beautiful photograph looking south towards. So we've got the Palliser Hotel in the distance, and then the vanishing point here is St. Mary's Cathedral. And here's something, I hope you guys don't mind digressions where I'm not talking about Jewish history in particular, but you can see how the cathedral was designed for this sight line, you know, like it's a beautiful line of sight to look down First Street Southwest in Calgary, all the way to the vanishing point, which is St. Mary's Cathedral, beautiful building. It replaced the original 1889 sandstone cathedral, which was demolished in 1955. This one dates from 1957. Can you get that view now? No, they've got what my wife calls the snow globe. Do you remember when the CPR built its Royal CP Pavilion next to the Palliser Hotel? So it's this really fancy plus 15 across First Street, and it's part of meant to be part of a new station for luxury travel to take you from Calgary through to the mountains on a luxury train. But it blocks the view. There was no regard for this, what was intended to be a beautiful line of sight from downtown to the cathedral. Anyway, Sam Switzer built the hotel, and I'm sure people who are here tonight have memories of it. I do not. I only remember seeing it. I was never ever inside. The most exciting story that I've heard about it, and I can't remember who told it to me. Oh, a Jewish person told me that they were having dinner there once, and a human body went vertically past them. It was a suicide jumping off the hotel, and like went right past the window by their table. I mean, I'm sure there are nicer stories associated with the hotel, and it was a real landmark. The other association that I happen to know about with this hotel is years after it was demolished, I went on a studio tour of CFCN TV, and we saw the newsroom, and I got to stand right at the news desk and see the panoramic photograph of downtown Calgary behind the newsreader. Well, the Sheraton Hotel, the Summit Hotel, was still there, even though it had been long since demolished. And here it is. It's gone. I don't know why. I suppose it was, and I'm sure someone here tonight will know, and we can get to that afterward. But it's just an in-park lot now. Then I've got a faint, like a sort of a light blue line here, because there's a quasi-Jewish association here with number 216 4th Avenue Southwest. I don't have a photograph of the man or the house, but James Wynne, who was the immigration officer in Calgary for many years, during the time when so many of our families, or families like ours, arrived in Calgary. He was the person responsible for immigration to Southern Alberta. And I mean, that could have just been like through, a land crossing from the US border. But anyway, he had a major role in the arrival and koshering of immigrants in Calgary at a time when so many Jews, like so many others, were coming here. And there's a possible Jewish connection to the house. And it was a revenue property for James Wynne. He didn't live in the house, but he owned it for many years. Fred Schuster, sounds like a Jewish name, lived there in the mid-1940s. Then we get a little further west on the block to the site of the International. We've got a photograph of one of the houses there. Irish-born Joseph Stanley lived here with his wife Annie. He died in the house. Lived here for about 40 years. Then we've got this attractive period postcard of the International Hotel. The only good story I've got about it, others might have theirs, and it was Jewish owned. It was owned by the Libin family for decades before it was sold. I gave a walking tour of downtown Calgary, a Jewish walking tour, to a Jewish group that was staying at the hotel. I can't remember what the organization was. But I gave them a tour of Jewish Calgary. Started out outside of the hotel, and the building to the left of the hotel, I'll just get ahead of myself here. It was the Prince House at Heritage Park. Peter Prince, who started the Eau Claire and Bow River Lumber Company and the Calgary Water Power Company, big industrialist in early Calgary, and his house was saved. And as a Centennial of Confederation project in 1967, his house was moved from 4th Avenue West to Heritage Park. And I believe it's still got the white on blue sign. Oh, let me go get just a second. I'll show it to you afterward, because I don't want to disturb the talk, but I'll show you. I've got a couple of those old street signs that we used to have in Calgary. I mean, we've got the white on green now. Before that, in the 60s and before the 60s, it was black on white. But early in the 20th century, the signs were white on blue, and they were mounted on the buildings at the corner. And every once in a while, you'll see one mounted on a building. And I think there's one showing 4th Avenue West on the Prince House. Anyway, so they moved the Prince House to Heritage Park in 1967. And what did they build in its place? British Petroleum, now BP. Anyway, this just tells you you never offer an opinion because you don't know who's listening. But I gave this talk to this Jewish group. And so we were standing outside of the International Hotel, and I was just giving them an introduction to, I didn't even know at the time that the hotel had been built by a Jewish family. But I was telling them, giving them the context for the talk. And I had recently read the book, All the Shah's Men by Stephen Kinzer. The author is Jewish. And it talks about how the CIA interfered in Iran, toppled the government, and installed the Shah as an absolute monarch in the interest of access to oil and as an anti, you know what I mean, to prevent the Iran from falling to the Soviet Union. But the book portrays how British Petroleum and the British government really were involved in this sort of international intrigue that led to you know, totalitarian government in Iran, and ultimately to the Islamic Revolution in response to that. So I was going on a rant about BP and how awful BP was and what they did to the world. Anyway, and then one of the participants in this Jewish tour told me, you know, my family is like big in BP. I can't remember what it was, but they were like, his family was huge in British Petroleum. And anyway, so there's my my Jewish themed story with the International Hotel. I'm nearly done with my talk, and then I'm happy to throw it open to questions, and any questions or comments or anything somebody else has got to offer. We're just down to our very last block here, and there's a couple of Jewish associations. This is what the block would have looked like at one time when it will look nice. There's my opinion again. And here's what you've got there now. This is Fifth Avenue Place. It's the former Esso Plaza. So if anyone like me used to go to cheap movies in the little theaters at Esso Plaza in the 80s and 90s, that's the place. So here's the corner view, looking southwest from First Street Southwest. Here's the fire insurance map from pre-1914. So you can see 4th Avenue is along the bottom of the screen, and we're going to start at the left at 203. Oh, here we have the Jewish associations with the block. There's two. This is the post-Second World War iteration of the fire insurance map. Now we get here, we'll start with our first Jewish association, the mansion at 203. Here's a photograph of the house. It was built in 1889 for Daniel Webster Marsh, who was an American who moved to Canada and settled in Calgary. He'd been like he'd fought in the Dakota Wars in the United States against Indigenous people on behalf of the U.S. government, the U.S. Army. He settled here, and he was elected mayor just months before Jacob and Rachel Diamond arrived. He became mayor in January. They arrived in the summer. So he was the last mayor to govern Calgary when there were no Jews living in it. So it was his house for many years, lived there for quite a long time. It was, I can't remember when he died, but the house was subdivided into apartments in the 1940s. And one of the tenants in 1943 is Harry Goffsky. We know this from the fire insurance maps. The Henderson's directories. Another photograph of the house on the corner, and Harry Goffsky and Mary Smith, photograph taken in 1941. So there's our Jewish resident in the former mayor's house in an apartment. We moved to Braemar Lodge, which was a dry hotel. It was originally built as the official residence of the Anglican Bishop of Calgary. And I think it was Bishop Pinkham who lived in there. But then the church sold it. Oh yeah, it was Bishop Pinkham until 1904. And then they sold it, and these two sisters, the Mrs. Mollison, turned it into a hotel, but it was a dry hotel. So there's no bar. So, you know, I mean, the advantage here is you're not going to run into drunken men at the hotel. It's going to be a nice, quiet place where you know what I mean? Well, you know what I mean? You're not going to run into drunks at this hotel. There was a piano in the lobby. There's beautiful description of it that an historian who knew the place wrote. So it was owned by the two sisters Mollison for many years, but then Ethel Diamond bought it in 1934, ran it until 1946. Ethel Diamond was not Jewish. Her maiden name was Frisk, but her husband was Jewish, Samuel Diamond, and he was a nephew of Jacob Diamond, the first Jewish settler in Calgary, and the grandfather of J. Joffe, founding president of the Jewish Historical Society. That's Reinach Avenue west of Center Street. Just take you to the end of the block. We've got a photograph of William Robertson's house. He was a clothier. He had Glanville and Robertson was the business that he had on 8th Avenue. And then he later left that partnership and started his own business, the Calgary Clothing Company. I don't have a Jewish association, except that his wife was the honorary president of the Samaritan Club. And the Samaritan religion, nothing to do with the Samaritan Club though, but the so named because of the New Testament story of the Good Samaritan. And Samaritans are another religious group that are like Jews. And then we get to the very end of the block. I don't think there's a Jewish association, but it's Calgary Motor Products, which is now called CMP Classic and located in the Northeast. And that's my talk for tonight. And I'll try and stop sharing. There we go. Oh, I would like to show you guys that street sign though. Just give me a moment. My neighbor, who was as much of a pack rat as I am, but he had a 40-year lead on me, he had a couple of these. So I've also got 4th Street East, and I'm going to find the right home for them. But this would have been mounted on the building on the corner, and that's what the street signs would have looked like. So that's what, and you still see a few of them in town. And that's, I think there's one on the Prince House showing 4th Avenue West. I haven't looked at the chat.
Before you...
Oh, hold up. Perlman. Oh, sorry. I spoke over someone.
Oh, just over me, over Sandra.
Hi, Sandra.
I just wanted to thank you before we launch any open discussion. Thank Harry on behalf of the Beth Tzedek and the Jewish Historical Society of Southern Alberta for your great presentation. And I apologize, there's a crying baby behind me. So, as usual, you're full of fabulous tidbits of historical information, and we appreciate it very much. Appreciate your sharing your knowledge, and good luck with your project. So, do you want to just open the floor and people just make their comments? There's a number in the chat. I don't know.
Yeah, the Perlman. Oh, maybe I'll go through the chat and then take any verbal comments. But the Perlman family, not Perlmutter. That is the plant, meaning the polar aerated waterworks. Oh, is Therese? Is Therese still there? Therese is here. Anyway, it's my mistake, Therese. Sorry about that. And thank you again for the photographs. A bit ironic that School Parkade named after James Short ends up being a Chinese school. James Short, yes, exactly. Yeah, that's certainly the point. So once again, that just shows you that when the city named the park and parkade in 1989 and 1990, they didn't do their due diligence. Sam Fishman went to UDS, normal practice. Oh, is the comment? Oh, Sam Fish, is Sam here? Sam Fishman? I'm trying to interpret the comment to UDS. Sam, did you go to the Calgary Normal School? Might be gone. Whoops. Oh, yes, you're right, Elias. Pardon my French. Oh, at the time, the summit was the tallest building in Calgary. Yes, a very good point. Is the Prince House allegedly purported to be haunted at Heritage Park? I've certainly heard that, Cheryl. Oh, and thanks for the thing you sent me recently, Cheryl. I'm sorry I didn't acknowledge it. I've heard that, and there's a booklet on hauntings of Heritage Park. So there are people who have seen seen a woman in the window and stuff like that. There's a phenomenon that it's sort of behind the stories. Peter Prince, who was a Catholic, and he and his first wife were buried in the Catholic cemetery. His wife died. Anyway, I can't remember why or what happened, but then he married three more women in succession, and he outlived all but the last one. And this, I can't remember all of the details, but you read about them, that it was a woman who was infirm or sickly, and wasn't well, and then finally died. So it invites you to think, oh, what was this? Was Peter Prince a serial wife murderer? But I have also read that it was like sometimes a charitable thing, like it was a way of taking care of a woman or something like that. Who knows? But you've got the elements of a ghost story there, but I don't happen to believe it. I always find when I'm doing this research, if there's any record of something untoward that happened in a building, and if there's also a ghost story, I never see the correlation between the two. They never match up. There was one time, if anyone's been to the Imperial Hotel in Bassano, I was in the bar and I was asking, is any good stories here? Any hauntings? And I was told this marvelous story about a haunting, about a railroader who had somehow caused the death of his fiancée. And he was so mournful. So his ghost sits in the room and he looks up the road to watch to see if she'll ever come back. And then I went to the coffee shop and I said, "Oh, what do you guys know about the ghost story?" And they told me a completely different ghost story in the coffee shop than the one I heard in the bar. So I never quite believed them. But yes, it is said, this is the truth of ghost stories, is it's true that people tell them and believe them. And $2 Tuesday at Esso Plaza. And then they made it $2.50 Tuesday. And then their cheat was, then they made it half price Tuesday. So if they charged $100 to see a movie, half price would be $50, because they didn't want to keep saying, $2 Tuesday, $2.50 Tuesday, $3 Tuesday. Thank you, Harry. Oh, whoops. Is this a sign from my parents? Cheryl, what was this? Oh, 25th Avenue. Oh, really? Oh, 25th Avenue Northwest. Well, there you go. 25th Avenue. Glad to be part of a coincidence, Cheryl. Fanny Malkin was the first Jewish graduate of the normal school. There we go. She went on to teach at a one-room school in Tolman. Therese, do you know when she attended normal school? Oh, David, can you unmute?
Harry, I'm not sure, but I think I could find out because we have a picture. I think the Historical Society has it. And actually, I don't know if it was her report card or something. We have that.
Nice.
So there might be a date.
Yeah. If it was like, I suspect that she attended normal school when it was at the SAIT campus, I imagine. Depending on when
well, there's a picture of the school. So
oh, okay. Oh, good.
I think it is. I think it is. Nice.
No, very good. Yeah, so we got a Jewish connection there. Another Jewish connection to the by extension that accrues to 4th Avenue because James Short School is the origin point of the teacher training college, of the normal school. Cheryl, what was true? Cheryl, I've got that's true, but I don't know what it was referring to. Are you still here, Cheryl? Zach? Oh, Cheryl's here.
She's talking about the movie theater.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and just so everybody knows, you can unmute yourself and you can also mute yourself. So you have the power.
There we go. Yeah. And then anyone else have anything to add? And I should say, I got some good tips of people to call or to write to add to this talk, and I didn't have the time. So everything will be included in the next iteration. Be a nice tight presentation. I'm enjoying seeing all the names and faces. You know, it's nice to have the people that you know come and hear you talk. Hi, Mrs. Chetner. I like the background photo, this old black and white one.
Well,
Seeing none, yeah.
thank you again, Harry, for your presentation, and thank you everyone for joining the Aesthetic and JHSSA tonight. And we look forward to more fascinating stories.
Thanks so much. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for having me. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Harry. Thanks.
Thank you.